I like sucking, but I ain't gay.
Legit bad podcast.
Fuck those honkies.
Kick ass.
Welcome to Costco. I love you.
He really knows how to suck a wiener.
Well, welcome back to the first, main show of Legit Bat. It's probably going to be the first show of the new year as well, so Happy New Year. I hope everyone had a great Christmas or Kwanzaa or Hanukkah or whatever you
Just
celebrate.
holidays.
Yeah. I mean, that's how that came about, right? Happy holidays, because we don't know what you celebrate. We don't want to offend you. We have Gary Wayne coming back for round 2. You were one of the more popular episodes, at least on YouTube, and I believe on audio as well, with your first appearance, Gen6 Conspiracy. He's the author of that book, and as well as new book, Gen6 Conspiracy Part 2. And so I can't wait to see what's in store for us tonight with this, because the first one was great. So I want to see what you added on in the second part. But guest hosting with us tonight is Brandon from Expanding Reality. Good evening, sir. Thank you for jumping on last minute.
How do? No, I'm grateful to be here. This is perfect. Like I said, the timing of this is outstanding. So, Mr. Wayne, I'm grateful to be here. This is going to be outstanding. Thank you.
Yes,
guys.
serendipitous timing.
Yeah, every time.
So if anybody isn't familiar with Gary's work, I think most of the people that are watching this are going to be, but check out the first book and kind of, Gary, give us a rundown of the first book. Do it as quick as you want, because I know you've talked about this ad nauseum, but give us a quick rundown of the first book, and then you can kind of go into what you added in on the second book.
Yes, so Gen6 Conspiracy Part 1, as I'm now referring to it, with the unexpected sequel that I did. The subtitle, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind, came out, 8 or 9 years ago, and is still selling very, very well. It is one of those books that is unique that's on the marketplace. There is no other book that's like it. It covers over 6,000 years, covering a conspiracy to enslave or destroy humankind that begins in Genesis 6 in terms of where I take it up, even though I'll lay down the case that that conspiracy actually starts before that, and with the creation of Adam. And it's a 6,000-year investigation on a connect the dot investigation into what I call the House of Dragon. So the serpentine bloodlines, the dragon bloodlines, the bloodlines of the giants, both before and after the flood. And as they are the offspring of the celestial mafia godfathers, as I like to call them, the fallen watchers. And those are serpent-faced dragon angels. So the imagery that you find in the gods and the imagery that you find in the ancient kingships comes from that governorship and the authority that they receive. So I follow the conspiracy in terms of how this comes about in the antediluvian epoch. So you have the rise of Cain and his line, and Enoch, who develops the 7 sacred sciences that's going to merge with the knowledge from the gods. And then they're going to have an alliance with the gods that they worship. And in the 6th generation, they're going to provide daughters to create some spurious offspring, the giants, the Nephilim, as they're called before the flood. And between that development of the sciences, which develops the mystical religions, and through the mystery schools that they're going to teach the nobility, the bloodline that's going to rule the world, because the Nephilim kings usurp the kingships, implement Enochian mysticism, and of course you have the education that comes out of the mystery schools. And that brings us to a point where you have a full-fledged hierarchical organization that is going to try and wipe humankind from the face of the earth. And they do it through all sorts of technology, through wars, and just through sacrifice and persecuting humans.
Eugenics.
And except for God stepping in and creating the flood to have the world start anew with 8, they would have succeeded in that second revenge, as I like to talk about it, because there's also a first revenge that I talk about in the first book. So it's about how all of that happens, how the antediluvian world is paraded into the first apocalypse by fire, how those organizations, how those bloodlines, and how that religion crosses the flood, how it affected our history, early history after the flood, how it affected our complete history all the way through since then, what they're doing today, and how they plan on bringing about the Dragon Messiah for the end time.
Yeah, and I mean, if you haven't, like I said, read the book, you'll have a lot more context for all these things, and he lays out such a great case for all of this, and using biblical history along with a bunch of other stuff. But so, how did you come across what you would add to that? What new things did you find to write a whole other book? Because I thought I called the show we did with you a grand unified conspiracy theory because it covers everything. It's great. So how did you add to this? That's what I want to know.
It's a good question. I guess it starts with I edited out almost 400 pages, say 350 to 375 pages, to sort of whittle it down to a size where it might get published and somebody may want to try tackling reading it. And if for people who don't know the size of the book, it's still 98 chapters. It's 800 pages. On my website, Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's with the number 6conspiracy.com. I have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters. And also up there is book 2, where it is a smaller book because it's a sequel. It's only 84 chapters.
Is that all?
And I have a generous excerpt of all of those chapters up there as well. So the question was, why would I write a sequel when I did such an extensive piece of work the first time? And I swore I would never write a sequel to it because I didn't want to be redundant. But somewhere on the way to the Colosseum, things started to change. I actually started writing another book, and then I stopped that book. I was a couple of hundred pages into it to write the sequel. And what happened was all of the contact that I have with people, if I take questions on shows, if they're sending me notes and asking me questions on social media or emails, the common thread through most of that is from Christians. And that common thread is that they want to know more about what's in the Bible. The first book they said was good, but we want to go into an area that nobody's covered before, and that's everything that you can put in one book that's going to cover everything that's in the Bible on giants, hybrid giants, the giants before the flood, the giants after the flood, angelic order, the rebellious angelic order, and how the world is run. And also what they wanted in that, which is, again, what I found surprising was, and just as the churches don't teach prophecy in prehistory, they were looking for information on how the giants would have any impact on end time prophecy, if any. So that's what this book is about. It's targeted at Christians, where the other book is targeted at all sorts of different belief systems, trying to draw them in to a common story. Now this one just goes deep into the Bible. And for people who aren't aware of how much the Bible writes about giants and hybrid giants and the fallen angels, it is the most preternatural book on the planet. And what's so odd is the shepherds running the churches deny that preternatural nature, except for whatever they find politically correct. And so that's what this book does. So it's just amazing how much information is there, and it's designed for Christians, particularly within their community, to take arguments back to their ministers or people that they're talking to. And here it is. And I put all the footnotes this time right on the same page as opposed to the end notes, because there's so much information that's packed in on the footnotes and the sourcing. So I want that front and center so that they have that for their arguments.
Yeah, and it was funny. I was actually talking to Jen before the show about this, but the way that, and I'm not picking on Christians here, seriously, like, you guys are great, but the Christians I grew up with are the most cherry picking people I've ever met and they'll say that you're cherry picking when you point out any inconsistencies. So having that, the footnotes and the sourcing, everybody's always looking for a source, you know. So hey, here's your source, the book that you're living your life by. Here's the source for that, the argument I'm making. But it I'm glad that you're so comprehensive in doing that. But Brandon, did you have anything you wanted to add or ask or anything? Any questions?
Well, to your point here, man, it's like the idea of that it's forbidden to eat shellfish. I think that's like 8 times in the Bible, something like that. But the word for "don't be gay" is mistranslation from pedophilia, which is hilarious. So it's kind of okay to be gay, just don't be gay with kids or fuck with kids at all, right? Which I think is just good advice. Maybe it should have been chiseled on a tablet. It turns out. But it's interesting as well how, yeah, my folks will serve shrimp cocktail at their Christmas parties. And I'm just like, guys, what's going on here? This is shellfish. You guys aren't supposed to be doing that. And they're like, your
To be
dad's
fair,
smoking a
though,
pig out back.
that's probably in the Old Testament, and they cherry pick that to say that applies to the Jews, not to the Christians.
Yeah,
Well,
this is
Right?
that's accurate though, because when you had the Gentiles coming in and they weren't Israelites, Paul came back and petitioned that the regulations not be the same because they're not a nation of priests. And so James adjudicated that and really, almost permitted them to eat anything that they want. So, what they couldn't do was drink blood, and what they couldn't do
Also, good
is,
advice.
yeah, they couldn't do sexual violations and be, and not understand it as a sin. And they couldn't eat food sacrificed to idols and strangled, is generally the way a lot of some of those rituals were done. So strangled and or sacrificed to idols.
Does strangled also mean throat cut because that's deprived of oxygen, or is it the specific act of hands on throat or a rope around throat to asphyxiate?
Yeah, you could translate that either way. That's why I was careful not to get it locked into one. And one of the things I do in the new book is I go back to the original Greek and I go back to the original Hebrew, and I provide the alternative meanings. And again, doing that, you want to be careful with that because a Hebrew word or Greek word could have multiple meanings. So you have to pick the right translation for the sentence that it's in, the verse that it's in, the chapters that it's in, and it doesn't contradict anything else in the Bible. And so the Bible is not perfectly translated. It has a lot of issues, and it doesn't matter which one that you're looking at. In the second book, I use the KJV, and I pick on that translation, I guess. But
The
I did
authorized version, the
yeah,
authorized version.
yeah,
But
and I
it's
did
good
that
rolling papers in a pinch.
and I did that for a purpose. Not only is the language closer, and I like the Strong's original dictionary for the concordance on that for the meanings. It is held up like an idol in Christianity, where it is on a pedestal, and you can't question that translation whatsoever. Otherwise, you're a heretic.
Right.
So I'm going to get some blowback for doing this, but I have the Hebrew word right there. And I follow my own rules in terms of how you do that translation. So when I disagree with the translation, I explain it.
Yeah, and you should. Like you said, there's so many translations, and it can mean different things based on context and verb tense and all these things that the average person knows nothing about Greek
Yeah.
or Hebrew or anything. So when you're relying on somebody else's another human's translation of this and then living your life based on that, that seems a little short-sighted. And I'm not blaming anybody. Like, a lot of it makes good sense. The Bible and most other religions, I break down into just don't be a dick. Like, that's kind of the main message. Like, if you do something and you're being a dick, don't do that thing. And that's put in all of us. We have a compass inside, most of us. Not talking about the psychopaths, but most of us know before you do something whether you should do or say that thing. And if you do it anyway, that's where I would consider it not a sin, like you're going to hell for it, but that's against what you should be doing, and you know it. So don't do that. So,
Well,
You don't need the Bible to tell you that.
right,
yeah,
exactly.
That's the spirit that's in you, and you're either suppressing that or you're not, versus the soul, from a Christian perspective. And another interesting thing is what you said about going to hell. I mean, that's one of the most horrific translations throughout the whole Bible. And I look at the mistakes as one thing, and then I look at some contrived translations in a whole different light.
Yeah.
This one is done to confuse the idea of hell. So you have, excuse me, so you have different meanings that are conflated three different places. You could even argue for four. That's compiled into the one word hell in the English translation. So you have Sheol or Hades as it is in Greek. That's one place for hell. That was the home of the gods. That's where the disembodied spirits want to go to from the Nephilim and the Rephaim, and why they go through all of those rituals and to try and cross over and get there. You have another place that is the pit prison or the abyss prison. That's conflated as hell as well. Well, it's in Sheol or Hades, but it's a specific location there and should be identified always that way. And then the third one is the lake of fire, which is not in Sheol or Hades. It's a different location altogether.
I would hope.
And that's reserved for a specific purpose. For those who are going to be judged, who are going to and aren't saved from that judgment, and will suffer the second death, and those who don't. So there's two different groups. But when you start to want to make hell as the lake of fire go away, the best way to do that is to conflate it in with other meanings, and it's really allegorical, and it's just the principle and the interpretive approach, which is the polytheist way of interpreting their religion and their doctrines.
Yeah, and conflation happens everywhere. Brandon, it looked like you had a thought popping up. I saw it.
Man, I got so many. Gary, you're fascinating, dude. This is awesome. I was we just finished this book, Word Magic by Pao Chang. Highly recommend. Just want to kind of throw this out there for everybody to what y'all said about words in our own language that we don't pay attention to. There's words in our language that we don't pay attention to, or not in our own for the first sentence, rather. It's just fascinating whenever you look at this from a perspective. Gary, I'm curious before the question that I really have for you here. What is sort of your worldview of this sort of meaning of life to a point, if you don't mind, sir?
Why we're here?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we're here as the resolution to the angelic rebellion. And we get that right from the beginning of the Bible. And the Adamites are selected and created separately from the people of day 6. And the reason why I say that is if you look at day 6 or Genesis 1 and you put that up against Genesis 2 with the Eden account and Adam, they don't agree. They're in total conflict. So you have two things going on there. One is that the Bible is in contradiction, which as a Christian, I don't believe it is, or there's two different creations. And so you have these people that are created on day 6. And you also have the Nahash, which is a beast of the field that's actually created on day 5. That is going to be used to deceive Adam and Eve in the first revenge, in Lucifer's first revenge in Eden. And so with the Adamites, they're created completely differently than the ones in day 6. And we get that in the descriptions. And Adam's created in singular. And he has a special spirit that is breathed into them to bring about the resolution to the angelic rebellion. And so that's the connection between humans, demons, giants, and fallen angels is that whole interaction. And the reason why the fallen angels are there to they're there to try and win a legal case for their rebellion. They haven't gone to the lake of fire yet. Not all of them have gone to the pit prison yet. Only the worst ones and the ones who violated certain laws, both before and after the flood, went to the pit prison. And they're trying to justify their rebellion and or make humankind disappear and go into oblivion, which would mean that they don't have to worry about humankind being created and being the inheritors of eternity, as the New Testament describes it. So that's what's going on. And they create the giants to get their hands dirty, to get blood on their hands, as opposed to the fallen angels or the gods, because they know the power of the God Most High. So they're going to create spurious offspring, and they're the ones who are doing the persecuting and trying to destroy humankind from the face of the earth. So that's why we're here, is to resolve the angelic rebellion, because that was done through free choice. The angels were created immortal without choice, but after that, they had a choice to follow God or not. Some chose not to, up to a full third of them did. Humankind is doing this through free choice as well, which is why it's so painful to go through. Could have been done easier at certain points, but humans are flawed. And so we're doing it through the curses of the covenant versus the blessings of the covenant. And we're doing everything for free choice, and everything's going to be resolved through free choice because God is greater than free choice. So we know what's going to happen in the end time. There has to be that to cross over into the millennium, which will be a comparative reign versus the last 6,000 years since Adam. And then off into eternity after the judgments and the punishments. So that's why we're here, and we're going to be humbled in the millennium. There's not everybody that goes into the millennium will be saved, just as fallen angels rebelled even though they knew God intimately. So will humans, and that's the humble it, that we're not just through faith automatically any better. So it's a process that's going through where all those that are going to be with God in the future have chosen to do so.
So I'm curious. So just to clarify the position, were we angels that are now in form, incarnate in human beings, playing out this angelic rebellion?
A lot of people say that. It's not, you can't really make the case biblically. You can cherry pick a couple of verses, but you can't make it fit with all the other passages. So all the names were written in the book of life from before creation. So all the names of the angels and all the names of the humans that would come. And everyone has a chance, angelic and human, whose names are written in that book, to have that name remain in the book or be blotted out. So we are not a second chance for fallen angels. We are here to,
with it being written in the book of life, doesn't that kind of like indicate predestination and therefore lack of free will?
well, from a human perspective, it would, but not from an alpha and omega perspective. And that's why it's so painful to go through. He knows the beginning and the end, and he's going to allow people to make choices all the way through.
But he knew already which choice they're going to make, so that's kind of not like they are making them, but he already knew that. So
it's one of my biggest challenges.
But the issue is if you're not going to permit them into eternity, it has to be clearly provable why they're not qualified.
But he did know ahead of time that they were going to do that or not do that, right?
Yeah, that's the perspective. Like he's manufacturing souls for hell automatically. You know, he's just like, a third of you.
He's giving a gift of life to everybody to make a choice.
Yeah, from a perspective, and it's one that I've shared. It's a challenging one that I look at, because I'm sitting here thinking, even as a child in church, growing up Baptist, I'm sitting here saying, so God knows the past, present, future. They're like, yeah, okay, but there's a place called hell that God created. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so God creates people and then knows what they're going to do, and then they go to hell anyway. And they're like, yeah. Well, why create the hell? You know what I mean? Why not just let people do what they want to do?
Because if you don't give a free choice, then you're slaves.
But is it a free choice if you're unaware of the modus operandi?
We have the information.
Well, we have information being told to us, but not innate in us. You have to discover this and seek it outside
of
yourself.
Which is why we will be raised higher than angels, because we have less knowledge. And what I was going to say before, I didn't quite get it in, was that angels had intimate knowledge with God and rebelled. We have almost no knowledge and have to go on strictly faith to earn our salvation.
Do you think there's a chance that people could change, though? I know God knows what's going to happen. He knows the beginning and the end, but do you think there's a large group of people that could come to a different conclusion and change their ways and get into heaven? Would God change for them?
No, he would just know that would happen already.
Yeah, and he knows and he knows what's in your heart.
Right, and it comes down
So
to, and
he's
this
all
is more
knowing.
woo woo, but we do talk about intention a lot, and that's what I think about is God knowing your intention. Like you might make the wrong move, we all do, but if you're doing it out of an intention of not trying to do the wrong move and you still do, I don't think that counts as a strike against you so much.
Yeah, I mean, nobody cannot sin. Nobody cannot make a mistake. That's human. So that's why you have the salvation process. So it's not fate, it's destiny because we all choose. Just because the Almighty knows how it ends does not take away the free choice. And that's destiny. And people like to, in a legal argument, conflate destiny and fate that way because the only being in the universe knows the beginning from the end.
But that would bring me to another question. Why? Like, I mean, if you're talking about God the Almighty, and I do believe in whatever version you want to think of the Almighty being is up to you. But when I think of that, the predestinator, the person, the thing that created all of this and has a plan and all, why? Like at the end of the day, there's a big why to me as to why, knowing the beginning and the end, why we would have to go through all this, like from our perspective. Like what, I don't understand that. Like you knew Adam and Eve were gonna sin, and you knew that 2,000 years or however many years later you're gonna have to send your own son as a human sacrifice to pay for that sin, so that people could choose for the next several thousand years whether or not they were going to join that side. I just don't. It seems like a big game or like a movie. Like, did God just make a movie and he's just watching it, and it's like
Well, that's what
the Matrix.
That's what the polytheists say because they're the rebellious ones and they follow the rebellious angels. No, it's not a joke. If you want people to buy into why it's better this way, you have to let them see what happens when you do it the other way.
Okay. I
Something
mean, I know that's polarity. Yeah. Go ahead, Brayden.
No, there was something I find interesting as well is that life automatically equals sin. That's what you said. We can't not sin, right? And so it's fascinating that it's built into the modus operandi, which is really where I've been.
No.
Go ahead, please.
There's a reason why we can't sin, or the reason why, there's a reason why we can't prevent ourselves from sinning is because this world has been corrupted by the rebellious angels.
Right, but I didn't do that.
So no, but we're swimming in that. So you're going to be affected by it.
This is the question: is the modus operandi?
Even the fallen angels, when they took, or gods, when they took a bodily form, they were affected by the corruption they created in the world. So only one has come who overcame that corruption, and that's why we have salvation. So it's not that we're born with sin. It's we choose to sin, but it's the overwhelming influence. And there's an overwhelming influence that's coming as another example, is that it's not that, a lot of Christians will say, we're not going to go through any tribulation in the end time. Well, that's not biblical, but nice hope, but not biblical in my opinion. In fact, we're told the opposite. We're going to go through tribulation. And that what we're going to be saved from is the wrath, which they lean on, but there's an hour of temptation and trial that we're going to be saved from that comes before that. Otherwise, we would be deceived, because even the elect will be deceived if that were possible. And that's why we're going to, some people will be raptured away when they're still alive. So that those people don't get deceived with what's coming, with the deceptions that are coming. So it's one of those things that we have to understand, that this world can overcome all humans.
It's just interesting when you think again of the modus operandi, just the way this place functions, right? That you're born into a sea of soup that you cannot avoid to be a sinner amongst, just strictly for survival, for lack of information, for lack of innate awareness of this place. Only one dude got it right, and that's interesting. I want to talk about him in a minute. But one thing I'm curious about here is that life in this sense equals sin, and sin in that sense equals debt, meaning a debt you have to pay off. And
So
as above, so below, we have these models in our existence. One is called the Federal Reserve, which loans you currency so that you can live in a sea of nonsense of these angels, anarchy, at debt automatically attached to it. So just to live, you automatically have debt in our life as sin, as well as in our
yeah,
currency with the Fed.
which is why the polytheists, they promise utopia, but it's only dystopia. It's just more of the same. And that it's the fallen angels or the gods who corrupted this whole world and run this world with legal tender for a period of time. And so when we're looking at the laws that run this world, the oaths that are taken in this world, that all comes from the worship of the gods and the pantheons or the fallen angels.
Do you think it's possible, just at a level and perspective, that you're going to come to in your lifetime and feel the way you do about polytheism, the way you do about your views now? Do you find that this is a possible temporary truth along your stop in the journey, that maybe one piece of new information would change the whole thing?
Yeah, no, I would say I'm beyond that at this point. So my journey sort of looks like this: is I was raised a Christian. By the time I was a teenager, I was leaving. I was buying into the evolution, science, the wisdom of this world, so to speak. And so I was a complete non-believer and not a polytheist. So when I got back on this path, and it was a long path back because I'm a contrarian and I like to verify things myself, is I and I won't go into the whole story as to what triggered me to come back, but it was I was challenged to read a book. It was a prophecy book, and it scared the socks off of me, and I needed to verify it. But then after that, and in writing this book, I had to learn about what are the other, if this is a belief system and it seems to be legitimate, what about all of these other religions? So I had to read and learn about all the other religions that I could get my hands on to see whether or not is that a better alternative or is this the right alternative? And my evaluation was this, the biblical path was the right path for me to be on.
Yeah, and everybody's got to make that, that choice themselves and what you follow. And like I said, I'm not knocking anybody for doing that. I grew up a very conservative Baptist, which I think is what led me to question all these things in the first place. Um, I get, I was just listening to what you were saying. And I totally lost my next question I was going to do, but Brandon, save me while I think about it.
I mean, really with this, then I have a question for you about. I want to actually bring up something you mentioned earlier, Joe, to something I was thinking about. And I brought up in an episode recently with somebody named Rachel Horton White. She's a big fan of the Jesus. It's his homeboy now. She is also very spiritual, though, so she doesn't necessarily follow the tenets of the Bible, but is into the Jesus archetype, right? So in that conversation, we had a question because I'm a systems analyst. Like, I like to see how things work, and I like to see them from different places, right? So I will step out of the entire situation and look at it from a new vantage point, but from a spot I feel is very neutral and objective. And so in that, I look at the creation of something like a story, as to what you said, Joe, that it could be found in the Bible when I looked at it under a certain light, that we're not a fan of the God, perhaps gods, air quotes, in the Old Testament. He was kind of a douche. But then we get to this Jesus character, which is really nicely inserted by the God that was created by the God that we weren't a fan of 5 chapters ago. And then he hopped in with this fix it all. And then we sort of like the resolution again, but there's still some shit ending to it. So it's fascinating. I related it, excuse me, more to like a Hegelian dialect, in the sense that there was something that was an issue here. I think if you look at it even further, the life and God taxing you for being here in the form of sin, and then punishment is a step beyond that. But if we just look at the game as it's played, then you look into this as seeing this character that's played out, or the story that's laid out, to where, yes, it sucked ass. Now this figure has come along to where in some translations and interpretations, you can rape and murder your entire life all the way up until the moment you take your last breath, as long as that breath is used to save yourself by calling Jesus into your heart, and then automatic into the gates. And so there's some challenges with the interpretations as they go, but let's just take it at form. Do you think that it's possible that the Bible constructs a problem reaction solution in the form of a Hegelian dialect within the text?
No.
Do you have a? Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say expand. I'm interested.
Well, it was a closed question. So
No, no is a complete sentence, but I'm offering you to expand. And I love your boundary if you'd like to hang out there.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's, you put up all of the standard sort of arguments and there's more. And nobody has to choose Christianity. But as a Christian, you have to choose it every day. And so I'm not here to try and have anybody be converted. What I want people to do is find out for yourself and make a decision, because even no decision is a decision. And we have the free choice to do that. But so many of the premises in there doesn't sort of stack up to what's written in the Bible. And there's a litany in there, but a couple of them is I wouldn't call the God God Most High douche.
I figure, I'm not being insensitive.
But
that's just
your
how
choice.
I refer to it.
That's your choice
fair.
to do.
Yeah.
But I would advise not to do that. I just had to say that.
He can let me know he's got a problem with it.
So there is no difference between the Trinity in the Old Testament and the Trinity in the New Testament. I don't like the term Trinity, but for people who are listening, they understand that it's a tripart nature. So you have, even in the first chapter, you have all three there in the Elohim. Elohim can mean the tripart nature or the superlative nature of El Elyon, the God Most High, the Father. So that's the one that is at the top of the apex, if you can call it that way, because they're all in complete harmony. You also have when God said. That's the Hebrew word amar. That's the word of God. So just as the book of John says, the word created all things, that's the word in action. And just as Colossians says the same thing. And so that is the Yehovah of the Elohim. As in the New Testament, cognate is the word of God, logos of theos. And you have Ruach, the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, that is shown in Genesis 1:2, because both are doing the creation. You have the creation aspect that Jehovah is doing, and then you have the life spirit of God that is going to give life and the spirit to beings to live, whatever type of being that is. And so you have all of those both in the Old and the New Testament, and they're in perfect harmony. So when you see Elohim in the first chapter, that's talking about all three. And when you start to move into chapter 2 and into the Adam creation, it switches from Elohim or God to Lord God. That's Yehovah of the Elohim, and is creating Adam for a special purpose. So when you see Yehovah or Lord, understand that's the pre-existent Jesus. So if you're talking about the one that is helping Israel and the one that is coming back for the end time, that's Jehovah. So I wouldn't make that distinction that one was good, one was bad. And typically what happens in the standard sort of arguments is you say, not you, well, you did the statement, but that could be a devil's advocate argument as well. So I want to be careful with that. People will say that this is the evil God of the Bible. And they say that because he brought the flood to wipe out all that high-level, technically advanced civilization. And then he had Israel slaughter innocent people in the desert, and on and on and on and on. It's like, it's a part of the story. It's not the whole story. And so the whole world would have been destroyed and humankind would have been wiped from the face of the earth, which is why God brings the flood, so that humankind, all the ones whose names are written in the book of life, have an opportunity to choose God. And there's going to be a resolution to the angelic rebellion. When you move into the time of the Exodus, there is a Rephaim hegemony that is running rampant during that period of time, and particularly in the covenant land. So people may not understand that there are tons of giant names that are used for nations. And then there's also that are giants. And then there's also the hybrid nations that intermarried with the giants to create a 7 to 9 foot giant compared to the average 5-foot human of that time, and smaller than the actual giants. So you have names that people may not have heard of as giants that are mentioned in the Exodus, like the Perazim, the Gesherim, the Gerzim, the Makathim, the Kenazim, the Kenim, the Cadmonim, the Cherathim, the Caphtorim. I can go on and on and on. There's just a huge list of giant nations. And then you have the Canaanites, who didn't move to Africa. They actually squatted in the land of Canaan that wasn't gifted to them through the council of excuse me, through God. And even though the earth is run by the assembly of the gods, that land was still reserved by God for his people. And so you have Canaan are going to move in after Babel to the land of the covenant, and they're going to intermarry with the Aboriginals. That's the Rephaim. And they don't want to be in slave servitude from the curse of Ham. And so they're going to create this hybrid race of giants, and will be intermingling with the giants who have settled in that land to await the nation of hope to do what? To wipe them from the face of the earth, that they be remembered no more, so the Messiah plan can't come about, and that they can put their dragon Messiah on. So all of these nations had an opportunity to leave. I understand why they didn't leave. They believed it was theirs and they weren't going to leave, but they all had that opportunity.
I kind of wanted to go back
but
to
but they chose war.
I wanted to real quick, like,
let me finish.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I want to make sure that's very clear because of the allegation that was made against the evil God of the Bible and the horrible Israelites. So this is a nation of slaves, not trained in army or military fare, no ability to manufacture weapons, way fewer than all of these nations, way smaller than all of these nations. Their presentation is leave the land of God for us to settle in, or we're going to have to wage war with support of our God. Their response was, we're going to wipe you from the face of the earth.
So I just a quick question about the flood. I don't remember if I asked you about this last time, but I mean, it does seem weird to me too, like that God would pick a specific race or, nation of people to be his chosen people when he created everyone. That aside, the flood thing,
Well, there's a reason for that.
Okay, we'll go back to that. First of all, after the flood,
but
how was the earth
don't throw out too many of those. I can't answer them all if I have to, because I won't remember them all.
No, that's fine. We don't have to get to them all anyway. When it comes to my head, I got to ask you because I've been asking these questions my whole life. But when it comes to the flood, with the one family that was saved, with the entire world being decimated, I get that. I kind of want to do that myself. So I concur with God on that. I kind of want to just wipe the face of the earth clean. But how does the earth... Yeah. How does the earth repopulate from one family after that? I'm not even talking about all the two of each animal. Like, do they just, but I mean, for lack of a better word, do they bone each other's families until we get to where we are now? Like, I've never had a good answer to that question. I don't know. Incest is expressly prohibited by every scripture ever. So how do we repopulate the earth with this one holy family that was saved without that?
Or even from Eve?
It's a good question. Well, okay. Which one do you want me to answer? Or do you want me to answer both?
Do the flood one. I mean, Adam and Eve is one thing. The flood's another one.
I can do both. It's fine. I just so after the flood, you have 8. You have Noah, his 3 sons, and his wife, and then 3 wives who are unnamed. And the wives are from all 4 races. And so you have new blood coming in for those wives, and you're still going to have some intermarriage But it's
a little bit.
Yeah, but you have to be careful here, though, because just as the Royals have a four generation law to stop disease, that's how you get to the repopulation with those 8 with that new bloodlines, that you have up to 4 generations where you can do it, and then you have to go to the generations that you weren't, or the people that were produced that you haven't intermarried with, so you start that cycle again. Did I say that clear enough?
Yeah, you did. It's interesting to take as a consideration as well. I mean, we kind of take it for granted, I suppose, but none of the people in the Bible had the Bible. So how did they know? How did they know right from wrong, or how to live like this? So it's interesting, to take the perspective.
Well, you presume there wasn't scripture before the flood.
Now, there's a bunch of stuff they cut out to make the Bible. I get that, and Gilgamesh ties that into the flood myth perfectly.
Well, you want to be careful with that too. So
fair enough.
Yeah. So the Torah comes down in the time of Moses, about 14 to 1500 BC, and so that's provided to to Moses, and you get the Genesis, you get everything up to that sort of period of time, and then you start to have the book of Exodus being written, and all the events, and all of the prophets. Now, all of that was kept, and what was provided is what God provided. Now, in the time of Israel, they had 70 scroll hagiographa that isn't part of the Bible, and most of those were lost. So we're not sure where some of those books are, like the book of excuse me.
Gospel of Thomas, the Nag Hammadi stuff, or
no, that's more Dead Sea Scroll stuff. I'm talking about more the Yasher is one of them. The one we have is Jewish mysticism. So it's the Book of Enoch would be another one, the original,
which is a real interesting book. Let me tell you,
referenced in the Bible.
And it's too bad we don't have for the Book of Enoch the original Hebrew manuscript. We have several Aramaic ones, we have Greek ones, we have Giaz, and we have some Slavonic ones, but we don't have a full Hebrew text. Now, we know a lot of the translated words come out of Hebrew there, but we don't have that verified chain of authorship and authenticity. So I like it a lot. It has some corruptions in it. Not that many. It's like 99% good, I think. But we have to recognize we don't have that original sort of Hebrew manuscript.
So
go ahead.
So anyway, what I was saying is that a number of the scrolls were lost during the time of the Second Temple. And so it'd be nice to have those, because we'd have more information, and one would think we would have the source books for Genesis, and that would include Enoch and other books, but some of them were lost, or they weren't fully verified even at the time of Judea and Israel, and there's a northern nation and a southern nation. So I just want to make that distinction as well.
What are your thoughts on other cultural texts that play into the stories that we also find in the Bible that were told to us as to be original and historically relevant to the time periods in which the Bible articulates them to be? Tablet of Gilgamesh depicting the flood myth is one of these things, as well as the virgin birth that's found in many cultures, but the Egyptians are just one to name many that came long before Christianity.
So the Epic of Gilgamesh is a terrific parallel account. Some people would say, you got 3 choices here. One is that the Bible counterfeited the Epic of Gilgamesh. 2 is the Epic of Gilgamesh would be a counterfeit of the Bible. Or 3, they're talking about the same set of events, one through a monotheist lens, one through a polytheist lens. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the surviving tablets date to about 2150 BC. You actually have fragments that go well beyond that to before the flood, Sumerian versions. You also have a Ugaritic version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. all are interesting to read. So when you get into the details of what's talked about and of course it has to be older than the Bible, because the Bible as we have it was brought to us by Moses through Moses in about 14 to 1500 BC. So just because it's older doesn't mean it's more legitimate. But I'm not saying the Epic of Gilgamesh is illegitimate. It could be just the polytheist version of the same account. So what's going on in the Epic of Gilgamesh is you have Gilgamesh, who is 2/3 God, 1/3 human, created from a king Lugabanda, king of Uruk, and a mother goddess named Nin, and produces this giant after the flood. Now, you also have a giant before the flood named Gilgamesh that's recorded in the Enochian Book of Giants. So two different giants, but it's not uncommon for post-Diluvian giants to have the same name as antediluvian ones, or named after them, is probably what happens. So he has a friend, Enkidu, who's created to offset this tyrant. And Gilgamesh is 6th generation after the flood. So he's the second incursion creation after the flood. Now, later, as you get into the later tablets in 9 and 10, as I recall, you're going to have the flood story come up, and he's going to go in search of Utnapishtim. Different names and different transliterations like Ziusudra. I won't go through them all, but you get the idea. And so he's going to search him out, and he actually finds them. And Utnapishtim is, he wants to get the wisdom that he had and whatever else sort of things that he can, Utnapishtim can provide Gilgamesh. But he is the archetypical Nephilim, 2/3 God, 1/3 human, chosen as a king to survive the flood on an ark. And all of his family, and there's more than 8. There's this quite a large extended family, are also all giants. This is a giant survival story, not a human survival story. So the macro accounts are similar, but the micro accounts are completely different. And they're talking about the same event. So I look at it as additional knowledge. We know in the Bible there's giants, both before and after the flood. We know giants show up after the flood. It's not 100% clear as to how they show up after the flood. And there's different ideologies on how that works. I kind of lie in second incursion, like with Gilgamesh being created. And you have them surviving somehow on the ark or on another ark, but usually with angelic protection to be able to do that. There's a third way that I won't go into, but I'm not a fan of, but there's basically 3 buckets. But what we do know is both in the biblical accounts and then the polytheist accounts, there's giants before the flood and there's giants after the flood. And there's a flood in all of those accounts. And and the destruction comes for the same reasons. It's because the giants created a dystopian hell on earth, and why the gods in the polytheist version say we're going to bring about the flood to start again.
So it reminded me of my brain fart earlier, the polytheism thing. So I wanted to clarify my position on that. I'm not polytheist at all. Like, I don't think there's Thor and whatever. Like, I don't think there's different separate gods. I think of God as more of a diamond that has different facets and attributes and aspects that we see differently based on who we are and when we are and whatever, but it's all one God. And whether you think of that as the Trinity or not, those still all have different aspects. There's love, there's war, there's anger, there's every gamut of human emotion encased in this God. And what you want to call it's irrelevant to me what mouth noises we make to describe the God that we conceive of. But I just wanted to clear that up, because polytheism and monotheism could mean the same thing to me, because it's just one diamond with different aspects that we notice. What do you think about that?
Well, even on the definition, they're not the same. One is a single God, as in the tripart nature. One is multiple gods. And
as in a tripart nature?
Yeah, they are the word of God, and they are the spirit of God. They are distinct, but they are from God. They are a branch of God, as it
that's what I meant, like aspects.
But they're part of the one being. And even in some of the polytheist natures, you get a triune as well in the original creation, as well in the polytheist version. But in polytheism, you have many gods, not just if you want to say three, which is from a Christian perspective, not an accurate argument, distinct, but one. You have hundreds, you have thousands, you have millions of these beings. That's polytheist, more than one God. So when we talk about one God, there's the Father, that's the top of that triune. Then you have the Word that God uses to do things through. He just says and it's done, and the Spirit that he provides life from. But it all comes from El Elyon, the God Most High.
All right.
That's what it
No, yeah.
It's what it sounds like is that it all comes from on high, from the same place, but it's manifested here in this 3D reality in some respects for us to interact with at a level. And so it seems like even the challenges or the evils that we find here, the adversaries, as it's properly translated in the Bible, I believe is Satan to be an adversary rather than an evil thing, which means just a challenger of your intellect, therefore inspiring you to grow. And perhaps like some things like portraying them as literal pits of hell or demons and things distract from the point that it's more allegorical in nature and therefore can be more useful to a broader audience, perhaps.
So Satan has been degraded from his angelic status as the greatest of angels, and Satan means adversary, and he essentially has a plea bargain not to be in the pit prison for a temporary period to do what he's doing, to help do the sifting. You have Halel as one of the names, you have Gadrael, he has multiple names, he has multiple parts, so he's more than what we understand him as today, and he is real. And he's at the head of the pantheon of polytheism. So when we look at that as sort of this obscure allegory, that's a polytheist doctrine as opposed to monotheist doctrine. And people can choose to believe what they want to believe. But again, we want to be careful in terms of how we frame these things.
Absolutely. And I think it's
now,
interesting.
One other thing, you're talking about on high and the projection. So in polytheism, and I would even argue even within monotheism, as we'll probably find out, is, the world is created through information. So this understanding as a very advanced computer projection, which is the matrix sort of concept, of polytheism may actually be true. Doesn't really matter how the world is created, but things aren't just done on high in terms of how things work in this world. The heaven of the gods is not on high. They have mountains where they were worshipped, but their gods are in Hades or in Sheol. So when they say as on earth, as below as on earth, that's what they're talking about, because their power comes from where those gods live, and that's in the earth, but in a different dimension. And in polytheism,
I'm glad you said
there,
that. I was going to say that. What do you think about different dimensions? Because that sounds like dimensional stuff to me.
Yeah,
it is, and they get there through portals, right? Some people even believe quantum bubbles. That's why you see these gods showing in these circles with their bodies or their heads. And so in the Ugaritic text, for example, where Baal and Ashtaroth are the main proponents to creating post-Diluvian giants, the Rephaim, the Rapiu, the Rapium, as they're called in the Ugaritic text, they go back and forth between the worlds, right? Both the giants and the disembodied spirits and the gods. And Baal, whose home is Mount Hermon, Saphon in the Ugaritic text, he actually goes between heaven and earth through the cave, the gateway to Hades at the foot of Mount Hermon. And you just can't walk through there and find Hades. You're going through a different portal. So there are different dimensions. We know this to be the case because even biblically, we understand that heaven is in another dimension, and it's different than the physical world.
It's not Sky Daddy's house. It's not up there somewhere. It's a different place that very well could be adjacent to where we are now, just slightly out of phase. That's how I like to think about it.
Exactly. So, there's then when you look at how powerful some of the technology was before the flood, these giants were accessing it in that world order, and they were going through portals. After the flood, in the polytheist versions of Babel, And Nimrod was building this tower, and towers, ziggurats, pyramids were known to be the same type of building for the same purposes and a technology. And so he would, in the Mesopotamian versions, he would climb this ziggurat and he would wave his spear at God and say, if you get out of line again, if you think you're going to bring about another flood, or we don't like what you're going to do, he had all of these hubris speeches. He said, I'm going to go into heaven and I'm going to slay you. And the only way he could do that is not by building stone bricks or mud bricks to heaven. That's not possible. But if this was set on proper energy lines, ley lines as they're known in the occult, and these were technologies and they're thought to be portals and a whole bunch of other different functions. The word that is used in Akkadian is for Babel is Babalu, and it doesn't mean confusion of languages. It means ILU or EL as it is in Babel, meaning a god or an angel. And Bab is in a gateway or a portal. So now, if that was that technology, and he did inherit that knowledge from the antediluvian epoch, like the Freemasons and the Gnostics believes, and the Polychronicon states this quite clearly, then he was thinking about going actually into heaven to do battle, just as Antichrist will do in the end time in Daniel 8:10. And he may have been wanting to go into the abyss prison to let out all of his imprisoned gods that he was worshiping, the ones that were sent before the flood, and then again shortly after the flood for doing the same creation. So all of a sudden, you're talking about a story that's recorded in the Bible that starts to make a lot of sense when you understand that the whole world was immersed in polytheism at that point, with the religion that Nimrod brings on the Noahites at that time. And this is the knowledge that Hermes brings him, that after finding this bank of knowledge through a pillar that he finds, and it's buried under the Great Pyramid, and he brings this knowledge back to Nimrod to build Nimrod's tower, the Tower of Babel, and to impose that antediluvian Enochian religion on them. So there was a thing that came up earlier, is why would God select a nation out of all the other ones in the world? He selects Abraham out of Mesopotamia because he's one of the few, maybe the only, who has faith left, because the whole world was populated with polytheist mystical religions enforced by the giants and that giant hegemony, just as it was before the flood in the time of Noah, so that if you didn't worship, you were persecuted and killed.
Well, sounds like we're headed for like strike 3 at this point. I mean, like,
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Third time's the charm, right?
Yeah.
No, so
Well,
we're gonna let you go here pretty soon, dude. We can close out here, but I got 2 rapid fire questions, pretty much yes or no. I just got to know, we don't have to debate about it. Is the Earth a sphere, or is it a flat motionless plane with a dome over it, according to the Bible?
Well, you could translate that either way. You can argue that forever. I think
your opinion.
we're at least a dome, and I think we're a globe. And
maybe it's a dome over a globe.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
could be that too. Except that firmament goes out to as far as the sun. So all those models of that small firmament doesn't stand up to the biblical aspect of it. But something goes around something. If you're going to explain things that we see on the Earth,
spinning.
Something is spinning and something is going around something. I don't care whether we go around the sun or the sun goes around us, but something's going around something.
Oh, you're going to piss off so 100%. Many trolls just with that comment. We do it all the time.
Wait, I have a question too.
Okay.
Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe God gives us second chances?
You stole my second one.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Well, we're married.
So reincarnation is a polytheist doctrine. So my answer is no. Reincarnation is more the opportunity for a spirit that doesn't die, a disembodied spirit of the Nephilim versus humans that sleep, to hopefully through other incarnations and ages could get back to a state of being a god. And it was not a full god to begin with, it was only a demigod, offspring of a god or a human female or a human male. So, no, I don't believe that. I believe we sleep as humans. But if, and I'm not even sure descendants of the giants actually have a reincarnation type of demonic thing where they're wandering the earth, or they're going to Sheol, or they're going into the abyss prison. But humans sleep, and I think most of the descendants sleep too.
Nice.
One
I did think of
question.
Go ahead, wait, you do. Hang on, let me do mine. You do yours.
Absolutely.
So I did think of the other one. In our lifetime, ours or yours, do you think we'll see what comes to pass in Revelation, or do you think that's farther down the line? Just your opinion. It doesn't have to be philosophical.
Yeah, I think we're in the fig tree generation. And if you're not familiar with that term, Jesus set aside one generation and he called it the fig tree generation in his oration in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21.
Oh.
And what he said at the end of that was, all the things that I said would happen, paraphrasing, will happen in this generation. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. So there is one specific generation. I think we're in that generation. I think we don't know how long that generation is. Could be 40 years, could be 70 years, could be 120 years. We don't know what the kickoff date would be, but I think it's the taking of Jerusalem in 1967. And I think we're in the sorrows right now, or the birth pangs. And people are going to be going around saying it's the apocalypse. We're going to wipe ourselves from the face of the earth. And it's not going to be. It's still developing. It gets stronger as it goes. So yes, I think we're in that fig tree generation, and I think we're in the last half of that fig tree generation.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. 2024 is going to be a shit show. We already know that. Brandon, your rapid fire question. Please shoot, brother.
100%. Okay, so giants, right? They were mating with the daughters of man, which in my mind is normal chicks, like Jen here, right? An exceptional goddess, by the way, at any standards. But simply by giant standards, you had these giants, right, smashing down with the local ladies there. So my question to you, sir, is what kind of vaginas were they making back then? You know what I mean?
What kind of what?
Vaginas, sir, on the daughters of man that the Nephilim had free access to.
Extremely expandable.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if you look at a lot of reliefs in the Middle East, they have these rituals that are engraved into these reliefs, and in many of those, they're actually taking semen and pouring it into women when they're sort of standing upside down, and pouring it in. So
like artificial insemination.
Yeah. So once they got that first generation of hybrids that were, 6, 7 to 9 feet tall, they'd be a lot closer in size to make that happen a little easier. Problem is they had to continue. They had a fertility issue after the flood. They had to continue to bring in outside bloodlines at a certain point, and they became diluted over the millennia.
So there's Nephilim walking around right now? There's descendants of Nephilim?
Well, I think so. I think so. But they would be the royales. Royale as in Roy, king, ruler, AL transliteration of ELILU, God. They are the
that
royale.
We can all agree.
Are there any distinguishing characteristics, any biological characteristics that would
they look like Prince William.
Well, they say they have
shapeshift all the time.
They say they have certain genes. So you have the gene of Isis is one of the terms for it as a generic term. The fairy gens is another one. Specifically, you get into ones like the Julia gens, which comes from the Roman gods down through the senators and the Caesars. You have the Elbe gens, which was quite popular through England, Norway, Sweden, France, England. That's another gens. And that's a gens, as you take that back in Latin, to a specific patriarch, a giant patriarch. So they believe they have the genealogies that they keep that takes them back to specific Nephilim and Rephaim and to specific godfathers. And here's a thing that if we are going into the end time, why people need to learn things, because we can't imagine what's coming if we are in the fig tree generation. And there's a term that Jesus uses in his oration is it's going to be like the days of Noah. And Noah lived 600 years before the flood and 350 years after the flood. There's giants and that technology and the gods walking amongst us on both sides of that flood. It's going to be like that. One might expect it's either descendants, a recreation of giants, or somehow giants saved off the earth, in stasis, whatever the multiple reasons are, might show up again. And that Ecclesiastes states it so clearly that there is nothing new under the sun, but will be again. And we see this sort of cycle that is happening, and it gets stronger as we go. So as the beast empires happened in biblical prophecy, we have the seventh empire coming that produces the eighth empire of Antichrist. And it's going to be very much akin to those old beast empires, and as such, to the Nephilim empires before the flood, or the Rephaim empires and the hegemony in the time of the Exodus. And also, we're going to get a second Exodus.
You ain't lying. Limp Bizkit just came back. Anything can happen, you know?
Well, dude, we'll wrap up here, but thank you so much for coming back and spending time with us. I know you're a busy guy and you've got more shows to do. I mean, this is the earliest I could schedule you, and that was like 2 months ago. So appreciate it. And good to see you again. Keep up the great work. I can't wait. When does your new book come out?
I'm hoping we're going to be able to start shipping in January. It's been at the printers for a month. It got out of the printing queue, which was there for 2 to 3 months.
Perfect.
Yeah, there's shortage of paper, shortage of labor, shortage of
shortage
printers,
of brains. So, everything.
Yeah, COVID kind of screwed everything up, I think. So broke
design.
Broke everything.
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah. And well, that's just it. By design, I think those sorrows that we're talking about are all contrived. We do it to ourselves.
Yeah, fair enough. That might be the title of the show. Shit. Well, dude, thank you so much. Brandon, thanks for stepping in. And thank you everybody for listening. We appreciate you all. We will see you all next time.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so we just finished up recording with Gary. Great guy, very knowledgeable. Go get his books if you're interested in any of this kind of thing. We don't usually do prologues to a show, but I kind of wanted to address a couple things. Normally, our shows are not adversarial, and I don't think that this was. And I'm not blaming you, Brandon, although fuck you for doing that. No, I'm just kidding.
Take it.
No, I'm. This is so funny. So we did not talk about this, and I'm very glad we're doing this because I felt like our guest possibly felt attacked. He didn't respond that way, but maybe there was like a vibe we were all feeling connected.
It was weird though, because the first time we did a show with him, I didn't feel like he was that Christian, because he was going against a lot of Bible stuff. He was being like, basically, this is where the Bible's fucked off, and here's why. So I thought we could go there, and I thought your questions would be more than welcome, but he went straight to like, no, the Bible. Do you feel, okay, as an interviewer, Brandon, do you feel like some of the questions we asked got sidestepped just a little bit, even just a little?
I feel that they were delivered with passion, which made the response in defense, which means that it was being defended rather than answered. So the positions will then get defended rather than an open conversation be there, which is why sort of earlier on in the questioning, as I was asking him, I'm like, are you able to take in new information and change your mind, or are you pretty secure on where you're at? Because any question we ask in juxtaposed to his points of view at that point, you know, nobody's trying to convince anyone of anything, but it's going to be an automatic debate at that point. And just to say the word adversarial, as you did, Jim, which I think is apt, but it's not horrible, just like Satan in the Bible, him and Jesus kind of kick it around. And
your
so
cat's licking its butt right now. Just sorry.
Yeah. It totally is. He's so comfortable with y'all. So this is Samurai rather.
I see.
Anyway, but an adversary just means challenge, and that's sort of what occurs here. And I think that dude's going to walk away from this with his reticular activating system being bringing in new points to reinforce his viewpoints based on our observations, or just questions rather. And then also in the same way, we're going to find, you know, different questions and do that next time we talk to him.
And I definitely gained new insights from him too. I just feel like the same questions I've been asking since I was 10 got answered in the exact same fashion this time. And it was basically like, just because it is, which sounds a lot like things nowadays where it's like, why is the jab good? And they're like, because it's just science. Like, that's what it sounds like to me. And I can't accept that. Like, I'm sorry. Gary's fucking great, but answer me better. Come on.
No, I don't disagree, and I think that you should get a satisfactory answer, which is why we ask questions in the way that we did, is because there's a conversation to be had. But what he was interested in was preaching and just making sure that his viewpoint was noted in the way in which he wanted to articulate it, not need to defend his position, which is what our questions invite to some people. Now, what's interesting about this, as well as the perspective, again, there's an inability to see things at a certain level. So when you're asked even about the exclusion of certain texts, he just immediately wrote it off. I mean, that was a backhand Andre Agassi would be jealous of, because he just fucking said, nope, we're not talking about it. And it's interesting also because he did do the quid pro quo about the Gilgamesh story of Moses, but the Tablet of Gilgamesh, Sumerian culture period, is far older than that tale. So even from a perspective, it's not in my mind, which is also why I phrased the question, because it's so biblically, historically accurate. All of it happened within a certain period. But if you're going to say that, I mean, nobody that, again, nobody in the Bible had a Bible. Nobody that wrote that thing verified any of it. It's just as easy to say that John Smith is right in some regards, because it's just somebody that wrote something down that he's either intuitively guided.
So I was going to say this, like, during the, sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off, but I held almost every single one of my questions. I think I asked one question in the beginning, and then I held it, and I watched you guys go back and forth with this. I don't want to call it a train wreck, because it was not, and we're not going to even put this as a prologue, because it wasn't a bad interview. But I held so many questions, because my first question was, he was talking about the translations being off, and that he wanted to research all of the different translation.
I'm like, how?
So I was like, okay, well, then couldn't you see that the Bible in general is translated possibly incorrectly, and then also interpreted differently by every single pastor in the country, or in the world?
I tried to say that too.
So I was going to say that, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to hold off on that. And then I just was silent for almost the entire interview, because I could just tell what was.
I wouldn't say it was rough. It was just one of those ones where I'm like, I'm not trying to offend this dude. I love this dude. I love his work, but I'm like, I have very serious questions that you're not answering. Like,
he doesn't have to answer them. That's not his job, and it's not his place to answer them. I understand that.
But
if there's anybody who could.
Well, it's not him is the answer. If it's anybody that could, it's you, by asking the questions and getting answers that are unsatisfactory, therefore leading you to other questions, which is the whole game here. Like that,
and leading to conclusions by not having answers.
Kind of. To ask him what our purpose was, Brandon, you had started talking, and I said, so what I was going to say was, what do you think our purpose is here? Because he was talking about just following God is like the only right thing to do. And that's fine. That's great. I believe that as well. But he was talking about the fear of being wiped off the face of the earth. And I thought, well, who cares if you're going back to God, if you know what, if it's a terrifying place that giants are running, that the elites are running, and they wipe you off the face of this earth. Yes, in that moment, you might think, oh no, my children, my wife, my husband, my family, my dogs, my cats, whatever.
But you're going back to God.
But you're going back at the end of the day, you're going to be boop and then back with God. So who cares? Like, that's not that. You think
Christians would actually be the most Buddhist people ever, because they know the ending. They're like, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Therefore, who gives a shit? You'd think that, but it's not that way. It blows my mind.
It violates natural law, which is why they're too internally conflicted the entire fucking time. You heard him say it himself. Christians have to choose to be Christians every day. Think about having to wake up and convince yourself of an ideology every fucking day. And that's
my ideology changes every day. Right. And I guess that's polytheistic, but
well, I think he was saying it more because we're swimming in the sea of sin is what he was talking about, where the sin is surrounding us all the time. There's all these outside influences constantly trying to convince us that bad things are good and good things are bad, and we should just be killing people and raping all the time. But we have to get up and choose to not do that.
No, but that's also a sin. So,
but yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
I don't think rape's cool. It's not in the. It's
according to the Talmud, I think it fucking is. Don't quote me.
Well, the Talmud, but that's not the Bible. That's not the book this dude's kicking on.
So no, but it's still written by Jews. So
this isn't going in front of the show. This is just a conversation.
No, this is an epilogue for after the show.
We're just talking. This is fun.
No, I'm putting this out.
Why?
Let's do it.
Because we're talking about the show. This is open conversation. Like, why would I not put this out?
Okay.
These are my thoughts. Okay. Anyway, we can wrap up. I got to take a fucking piss.
I'll say
go
this
ahead,
as
Brandon.
well.
Final
to
point.
To the thing where you were like, this is weird that he last time and now this time. Think of the time period we're in right now. It's Mercury retrograde like a motherfucker. So there's communication issues.
You
I know. I'm going to talk about Mercury's
fucking
Mercury's
oh
a
my
cowgirl,
God.
dude.
Mercury's in
All fucking
Gatorade.
month. That's right.
Mercury's
that's
in
right.
Gatorade, and we're polytheists.
Say what you will. But
No,
I'm just kidding.
I know your electronics have been fucking with you and your text messages and shit and autocorrect and all that kind of shit. And I know that communication between human beings is challenged at this time period. So it's just one of those things, you know?
All right, you're not wrong.
That's pretty normal too, though.
All right.
I love
All right,
that.
I'm going to go drain the main vein.
This was fun.
Brandon, thank you so much for coming on last minute.
Appreciate it
Love
so
you.
much.
Anytime. Love you.
All right. And thanks everybody on Rockfin YouTube. If this stays on YouTube, by the way, our last show got pulled from YouTube. So if not, go to Rockfin. But I guess if it's pulled, you won't know this. So audio it is. All right. Peace.